Hey everybody, this is Matt Atkinson, and you're watching Forward Gettysburg with Aaron Smith.
What is going on, everybody? Aaron Smith here for Forward Gettysburg. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I am so excited for today's episode. This is something that I absolutely am so passionate about. Not only do I love the Battle of Gettysburg, the military actions that took place here, but I think the history of tourism to the battlefield and the history of the park is really fascinating. So today we are having a history of the park episode. If you guys are liking the channel, if you guys are enjoying the content, please remember to like and subscribe. So let's get into it. Today we are talking about the Towers of Gettysburg. So the Gettysburg National Military Park once had 5 observation towers. Now we know about the 3 that are still existing. We know about the tower on Culp's Hill directly behind me. We know about the tower on West Confederate Avenue there, also known as the Longstreet Tower. Not only do we have those towers, but we also have the Oak Ridge Tower. And there were also 2 other towers that are now demolished. We had a tower on Big Round Top, and we also had a tower in Ziegler's Grove. So these towers were constructed by the United States War Department, who had control of this area, and they were constructed between 1895 and 1896. Yes, that's right. This tower behind me, folks, is over 125 years old, still as sturdy as the day it was built. These towers were designed by a man named Emmer Cope, and Emmer designed them with signature features worthy of a national park. These are certainly dominating towers on the battlefield. If you guys have never climbed up one of the towers here at the Gettysburg National Military Park, you are missing out. You get incredible views. Here, the Culp's Hill Tower, you can see all the way out to the east. You can see Cemetery Hill, and you just realize how much of a dominating position that Culp's Hill truly was. The Longstreet Tower, you can see the entire south end of the battlefield, the Round Tops, the wheat field, the peach orchard. You can see where Longstreet made his attack off of Seminary Ridge and Warfield Ridge there on the second day. So these towers are incredible parts of the Gettysburg National Military Park here. Emmer Cope actually was a sergeant with Governor K. Warren's Corps of Engineers, and in October of 1863, he's going to make an incredibly detailed map, a beautiful map of the Gettysburg battlefield. He also then is going to go on later on to become superintendent of the national park here, and he's going to be the last Civil War veteran that will be superintendent of the Gettysburg National Military Park. A report published shortly after the construction of these towers in 1896 is going to describe them as solid and well-built structures, and located as they are, afford the observer a complete and satisfactory view of the entire scene of the great battle. Now, these towers are fairly tall. For example, the Culp's Hill Tower behind me is 60 feet tall. The Oak Ridge Tower originally was 75 feet tall. The Big Round Top Tower was another 60-footer. The Longstreet Tower was another one of these gargantuan 75-foot tall towers. And the Ziegler's Grove Tower, this is where I had to do a little bit of guesswork and research. So I couldn't find any statistics on the height of the Ziegler's Grove Tower. So what I did is I compared a picture of the Longstreet Tower, which was a 75-foot tower, with the Ziegler's Grove Tower, a photo of the Ziegler's Grove Tower. And what I basically did was I counted these sections of stairs here, and I came up with 8 sections on the Longstreet Tower, and also noticed that the Ziegler's Grove Tower had 8 sections as well. So my best educated guess, and I mean, really, how educated is it? Let's be real here. But my best educated guess is that the Ziegler's Grove Tower was another one of these mammoth 75-foot towers on the battlefield. So my whole interest in the towers and really the whole interest in the history of tourism at Gettysburg really kind of sparked out of a impromptu trip up to Big Round Top. I decided I wanted to, go up to Big Round Top, see what I could see, all this kind of stuff. And when I got up there, I noticed these large concrete foundation blocks. I'm like, what are those? So I did a little bit of Google searching. I just kind of typed in Big Round Top concrete foundation blocks. I thought maybe they were remnants of an old monument. As you know, they do move monuments around. They have in the past. So I thought maybe, oh, well, maybe that was an old monument. But what I found was that there was a tower on Big Round Top at one time, and I had no idea. And it just really started to spark my interest. Another thing that really got my interest in the history of the battlefield, not the battle itself, but the history of the battlefield, is this exquisite 1913 map published by the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. And it is a gorgeous map. I'm going to put it on screen right here for you guys to see for yourself. But on this map, it had the locations of all 5 towers at their full height. And it was just an incredible moment. I was like, wow, this map, as you guys can see, it's how the battlefield looked at 1913. So it's an incredible piece of history. And it was actually kind of a catalyst for research further into this topic for me. So directly behind me is the Oak Hill Tower. In its modern day form, it stands at about 25 feet. And when you get to the top of it, you can see a pretty excellent view of the first day's battlefield. However, like I said earlier, this was not the original height of the Oak Hill Tower. The Oak Hill Tower was originally one of those 75-foot behemoths. So the Oak Ridge Tower, in the 1960s, there's going to be a storm, I believe, that hits Gettysburg. But it's going to face some significant damage, and the Park Service is going to survey the tower, and they're going to determine that they don't need to necessarily tear the entire tower down. So what they do is they're going to cut it down to 25 feet. It's going to lose more than half of its total height here on Oak Ridge. So right now I am standing at the Louisiana Monument, probably one of the most beautiful monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. But directly behind me, you guys can make out a fairly good view of Big Round Top. That largest hill right over my right shoulder is Big Round Top, and that's where another one of these observation towers is going to be. However, like Oak Ridge's tower, the Big Round Top Tower is going to be damaged in the 1960s. However, unlike that Oak Ridge Tower, the Park Service, they'll do their survey on the tower, and they're going to determine that it's really just not worth fixing. It's going to be damaged severely, and the Park Service is going to determine that it is dangerous and obsolete. Now, as we know, there aren't really a whole lot of visitors to Big Round Top in the first place. Sure, you have your people, your hardcore history buffs that want to see all the monuments up there. You have your hikers and stuff like that they'd like a challenge. But other than that, there aren't really a whole lot of visitors to Big Round Top. On top of that, the maintenance cost for this tower was enormous. If you can imagine, every time they needed to fix something, paint the tower, do something to it, they had to haul all of their supplies up that huge dominating hill here on the south end of the battlefield. So the Park Service in 1968, they're going to tear down the Big Round Top Tower. Now you guys can see the Longstreet or the West Confederate Avenue Tower directly behind my right shoulder behind me. This is the tallest tower currently on the field at Gettysburg at 75 feet tall. And like I said earlier, the views from up top of that tower are incredible. You can see the entire south end of the battlefield here. You can see Devil's Den, the Round Tops, the wheat field, the peach orchard, Cemetery Ridge. You can see all the way up the Cemetery Hill. It commands an incredible position here, and you guys really, if you're visiting the field, you need to get to the top of these towers. So just like the Culp's Hill Tower, this tower, the Long Street Tower, is over 125 years old. It just goes to show how sturdy, how well built these towers were all the way back in 1895. So I'm currently in the area of Ziegler's Grove. The area behind me, that kind of cluster of trees over there, that's known as Ziegler's Grove. I'm here where a lot of action on the third day would have happened. The fields of picket charge are just over there. And behind the camera over that way is the Meade equestrian statue. So the final tower that I want to talk about is the Ziegler's Grove Tower. Obviously, this is another tower that is no longer with us. In 1961, when construction began on the Cyclorama building, which would have been off this way, the Ziegler's Grove Tower was tore down. The Cyclorama building had an observation deck on it, so they tore down that old War Department observation tower. Now, it's been a little bit of a quest of mine, if you will, to determine the exact location of the Ziegler's Grove Observation Tower. And according to that 1913 Pennsylvania Railroad map, the observation tower was in the northeast quadrant of the intersection of Meade Avenue and Hancock Avenue. Now, some eagle-eyed visitors to the battlefield may be saying, Aaron, there is no Meade Avenue. However, there was a Meade Avenue at the time of that 1913 Pennsylvania Railroad map. So where Meade Avenue was, it's currently the walking trail that goes down toward the Widow Leicester House, which would have been Meade's headquarters during the battle. So I am actually in that northeast quadrant. So another interesting history of the battlefield area that I wanted to discuss while I was at this end of the battlefield is the old angled tour road. As you guys can see, there's some off-colored grass in this area. You see the much brighter green grass compared to the more yellow, faded, light green colored grass. So that dark green colored grass was actually a tour road. And even cooler yet, they show that little tour road on the 1913 Pennsylvania Railroad map. You can actually make out where the road would have started here. It's actually quite obvious, just this little cut right here up to these interpretive markers. You can see where the road would have started, and there's also the same thing over on this end, just a little bit south of me as well. So it's very evident where this angled tour road was. Just a neat little tidbit history of the battlefield thing that I wanted to share with you guys. So old photographs of the Gettysburg battlefield put the Ziegler's Grove Tower directly across from the Bryan Farm. Right here is the Bryan Farm. It was actually owned by a freedman during the time of the battle, and him and his family would flee the Gettysburg area. But in a lot of the old photographs, the Bryan Farm is a much more modernized building. As you can see, the road here has a very distinctive turn to the right. And when we look at that 1913 Pennsylvania Railroad map, we can definitely make out that distinct right turn. Now, directly behind me is the Bryan Farm off to my left shoulder. So what I did was I then examined a lot of these photographs a little bit more closely. And there is one photograph called A Walk Through Ziegler's Grove. And it's facing south, which is the exact direction that the camera is now facing. I'm facing north. So on the far, far right of this photograph is the monument to the 108th New York. If you guys can see off to the camera to my left, that shamrock-shaped monument is the 108th New York. In the foreground of that photograph is Butler's 2nd U.S. Battery G. That is directly to my right. In fact, I'm not sure the camera can see it, but I'm staring at it directly to my right. So if we look at this photograph, A Walk Through Ziegler's Grove, we can see that the Ziegler's Grove tower would have been right over there. This has been a lot of fun. I actually am really into pinpointing these old markers, these old towers, stuff like that. The overlooked historical, off the beaten path parts of the Gettysburg battlefield. Yes, I find the battle absolutely fascinating, and I am obsessed with learning more about the actions that took place here on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. What I find just as fascinating as the battle itself is the history of the battlefield and the history of the tourism to the area. There is one more tower that I would like to talk about, and it's a bit of a controversial one. So I'm still in Ziegler's Grove, however the camera is now facing north. Directly behind me is Cemetery Hill. You might be able to make out the headstone markers of the National Cemetery and maybe even some of the Evergreen Cemetery right next to it. About 22 years ago, if you were viewing this very same scene, you would see an incredibly tall, brutalist style architecture tower looming in the distance. That was the Gettysburg National Tower. That tower was built in 1974. It was 300 feet tall. It was a huge tower. It was an eyesore on the battlefield. Nothing ruined the immersion of learning about the Battle of Gettysburg like viewing that key position of Cemetery Hill and seeing this god-awful, ugly, octagonal dodecahedron-shaped weird tall tower. Now that tower was a private venture by a businessman, and it was plagued from the very beginning with all kinds of outcries against it, but it was private land and he built it there. However, in the early 2000s, I think 2000, 2001, they are going to demolish that tower. Park Service is going to buy up that land and demolish that tower. They're going to give it a gun salute. They're going to fire mock cannon, and then they're going to demolish it. It was pretty amazing to watch that happen live as a 5th grader. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolutely amazing video. We found the location of the Ziegler's Grove Tower. We talked about all the other towers that were on the battlefield. We talked about the god-awful Gettysburg National Tower, and I hope you learned a lot. This was actually a really fun time for me. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Smith. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you on the next one.